Queen Elizabeth II didn't just carry the crown for 70 years. She wrote 15 unspoken rules that carried it with her, and Charles broke every one before his 3rd year. They were not statutes, they were convention, the public silence, the neutrality on family, the distance from the mistress, the uniform of duty, the hidden household. Everyone held for a lifetime and undone in 36 months. Charles cannot unbreak what Elizabeth held. The rules lived in no document. They were in her conduct. For 7 decades, Charles inherited the crown, the palace, the fleet, the calendar, and a rule book written in her walk, and he put Camilla on the throne before year 3. By the end of this video, you'll hear all 15, ranked from quietly abandoned to constitutionally reversed. Stay for number 11, the rule that only exists because a king once gave up the throne rather than break it. And near the end, Rule 15, the one line Elizabeth kept for one specific woman and Charles broke for another. Let's count them down. Number 1, never complain, never explain. She held it 70 years. He broke it on television. The first rule was the smallest and the hardest. Never complain, never explain. The sovereign shows nothing. Across 70 years, through scandal, through loss, through the worst years any family ever endured in public, Elizabeth never once aired a private grievance. The mask never slipped. Not when her sister's marriage collapsed. Not when 3 of her 4 children divorced. Not when the palace burned. She swallowed all of it and gave the country a steady face. She buried the husband she'd been married to for 73 years, and she was back at her desk within days. That was the rule. You never let them see what it cost you. Charles gave the country his feelings, a lifetime of them, the lobbying, the opinions, the wounded interviews, and most publicly, in 1994, a confession on national television about the private life his mother would have died before discussing. Elizabeth kept the silence for 7 decades, so the crown would look like it stood above human weakness. Her son spent it explaining himself. The very first person to pay for a husband who could keep nothing to himself was Diana. Number 2, duty before self, every single day. He reshaped the monarchy around what he wanted. At 21, Elizabeth stood before a microphone and pledged her whole life to service, and she kept it. She worked into her 90s. She stood in the rain, she read the boxes. She never once let a personal wish come before the institution, because she understood the institution was borrowed, not owned. Charles inverted it. The defining choice of his life placed a personal relationship at the very center of the monarchy. The institution reshaped around what he wanted, not the reverse. Elizabeth bent herself to the crown for 70 years. Charles bent the crown to himself in 3, and the woman who paid for that inversion first was Diana, married to a man who wanted his own happiness more than he wanted the vow he'd made in front of the world. Number 3, keep the private life private. She was a mystery for a lifetime. His was a headline. Nobody ever knew Elizabeth. Her marriage, her faith, her grief held close always. The public saw the monarch. The woman stayed hidden. She built that distance on purpose. It was the mystique that kept the crown sacred. Charles's private life became the most public royal story of a generation. The affair, the divorce, the remarriage, all of it out in the open for decades. Elizabeth kept her marriage a closed door across 7 decades. Charles turned his into a national drama. The woman inside that drama, exposed and humiliated in front of the entire world, was Diana. Those were the personal rules. Silence, duty, discretion. The next ones are bigger. They're the ones that keep the crown itself clean. I really want to get to number 11. That's the rule Elizabeth's entire reign is built on. The one about a king who gave up his throne rather than break it. But first, 4 through 10. Because those are the ones where Charles didn't just bend a personal habit. He broke the machinery that keeps the monarchy above the fray. And once you hear what he confirmed on television, you'll understand why his mother never sat for an interview in her life. Number 4, absolute political neutrality. 15 prime ministers, 0 opinions. He wrote to the ministers. For 70 years, no one ever knew Elizabeth's politics. 15 prime ministers passed through her drawing room, and not one of them ever left knowing what she thought. Neutrality wasn't caution. It was the crown's armor, the thing that let a hereditary monarch survive in a democracy. Charles couldn't hold it. As prince, he wrote ministers directly, the Black Spider memos, 27 letters pushing his views, published in 2015 for the whole country to read. His mother spent a lifetime making sure no government ever felt her hand. Her son spent decades pressing his onto theirs, and the open question hanging over his reign is the one no one can answer. Can a man who lobbied for 40 years actually stop? Number 5. Never confirm the scandal on camera. She never did. He admitted the adultery on ITV. Elizabeth refused every confessional interview, not once in 70 years. The troubles, the crises, the affairs, none of it discussed on camera. The family's pain stayed behind the wall where the country couldn't feed on it. In 1994, Charles sat down with Jonathan Dimbleby and admitted the adultery on national television. The most private wound in the family, confirmed on ITV, watched by millions. Elizabeth understood that the moment you narrate the scandal, you become it. Charles narrated it. The woman whose marriage he was narrating, the woman sitting somewhere watching her husband confirm the affair to the nation, was Diana. He didn't just betray her in private, he confirmed it in public, the one thing his mother spent 70 years refusing to do. Watch that interview back and count the cost. A future king on camera, telling the nation he had been unfaithful to the mother of the heir. Elizabeth would have gone to her grave before she said it out loud, and she did exactly that. 70 years on the throne, and not one confession. Number 6. The sovereign never takes sides. She was the referee. He chose Camilla. Elizabeth held herself above every faction. Through the worst of the family's civil war, she stayed the referee, never a partisan. Because the second a sovereign is seen to take a side, half the country stops trusting the crown. Charles is seen again and again to have chosen one, Camilla's, against the memory, the standing, and the legacy of the mother of his heir. Elizabeth kept herself above the fight for 70 years. Charles walked into it and picked a corner, and the side he chose was the one Diana was fighting against. Even now, the man on the throne is remembered by half the country as the husband who took the wrong side of the story that broke Diana. Number 7. The household stays behind the wall. Hers was sealed, his leaked. What happened inside Elizabeth's palace stayed inside it. Staff loyalty was absolute. The household stayed out of the story. She built a wall of silence around the crown, and it held all 70 years. Charles's household leaked. The staff dramas, the resignations, and the notorious Tampon-gate tape, the most humiliating private recording in royal history, turned the inner sanctum into public property. Elizabeth's wall held, Charles's crumbled, and behind every leak was a story that always seemed to circle back to the same two people, and always at Diana's expense. Number 8. Never let the family drama become the monarchy's story. Hers never was, his always is. Elizabeth managed every crisis so the institution stayed the headline, never the soap opera. The crown was always bigger than the row. That was the discipline. Keep the monarchy larger than the mess inside it. Under Charles, the mess is the monarchy. The rifts became the dominant story, the drama eclipsing the crown it was meant to serve. Elizabeth spent 70 years keeping the family out of the plot. Her son made the family the only plot there is. The original drama, the one every later rift echoes, was the one with Diana at its center. Number 9. Keep the mistress at arm's length. She did for decades. He moved her to the center. For years, Elizabeth kept a pointed, icy distance from Camilla. No public embrace, no endorsement of the relationship that had broken Diana's marriage. That coldness was a message, and everyone in the palace could read it. Charles moved Camilla from the shadows to the center. Married, titled, working royal, eventually crowned. The arm's length his mother kept became the throne his mother would never have offered. Elizabeth held Camilla at a distance out of respect for what the family had done to Diana. Charles closed that distance completely, and every step Camilla took toward the center was a step over the memory of the woman she replaced. Number 10. Never make the mistress a working royal. She was kept out. He brought her in. Camilla was kept out of official royal life for years after the affair. No duties, no role, no standing. That exclusion wasn't an accident. It was the institution's judgment enforced from the top. Charles brought her all the way inside. Duchess of Cornwall, then a working royal with patronages, then queen. The outsider became the institution. Elizabeth kept the mistress off the payroll and out of the story. Charles reversed both. And Diana, who did the work, who earned the public's love, who gave the monarchy its most beloved decade, was gone, while the woman who replaced her was handed the role Diana had once filled. Number 11. Never put a divorcee at the sacred center. Her whole reign was built on that rule. This is the one Elizabeth's entire existence as queen depended on. In 1936, her uncle Edward VIII gave up the throne rather than put a divorced woman at the sacred center of the monarchy. That abdication is the only reason Elizabeth's father became king, the only reason she ever wore the crown at all. She spent 70 years honoring the line that made her. Charles is that exact man. A divorced king remarried to a divorced woman, sitting at the precise center the 1936 abdication was fought to keep clear. The rule that created Elizabeth's reign is the one her son is breaking, just by sitting there. And the marriage he ended to get there, the one that made him a divorced man in the first place, was his marriage to Diana. Elizabeth's crown existed because a king once chose the rule over the woman. Her son chose the woman. Here is the part that should stop you cold. The abdication of 1936 handed the crown to Elizabeth's father and then to Elizabeth, precisely so that a divorced woman would never sit at the heart of the monarchy. Charles didn't just break that rule. He is the living proof it's broken. A divorced king beside a divorced queen, in the exact seat the rule was built to keep clear. Number 12. Keep the mistress off the sacred stage. She limited it. He put Camilla everywhere. Even after she tolerated the marriage, Elizabeth limited how far Camilla stood inside the most sacred royal moments. The balcony, the state occasions, the carriage, all kept measured, all kept careful. Charles placed her at the very heart of them. Beside him, in the carriage, on the balcony, at the altar of Westminster Abbey. Every distance Elizabeth kept, Charles closed, and every sacred stage Diana once stood on, the balcony where the world watched her wave, the abbey where a nation watched her marry, became a stage for the woman who took her place. The last three rules are the ones no convention could soften. They're written into the crown itself. Stay with me because Rule 15 is coming. The single line Elizabeth drew for Diana's sake and held for 17 years that Charles crossed for Camilla. But first, 13 and 14, because those are the two he didn't just bend quietly. He broke them in front of the whole world in Westminster Abbey with a crown in his hands. Number 13, never crown the mistress. In 70 years, she never did. He did it in the Abbey. In 70 years, Elizabeth never placed a crown on Camilla's head. She never elevated the woman at the center of the family's deepest wound to the sacred rank of a crowned queen. That restraint was the clearest message she ever sent without speaking. On the 6th of May, 2023, at his coronation, Charles had Camilla crowned queen. The mistress, anointed and crowned in Westminster Abbey, in the same sacred space where Elizabeth herself was crowned in 1953. It is the single most visible break of all. His mother refused it for 70 years. He did it in his first. And somewhere in that abbey, in every heart that still remembered her, was Diana, the wife who was never crowned, watching through her people, the mistress take the crown she never got to wear. Diana was never crowned. She divorced before Charles was king, and she died a year after that. The crown that might one day have been hers went, in the end, to the woman she was warned about. Elizabeth refused to place it for the length of her reign. Charles placed it in his first. Number 14, guard the mystique. never be seen to want it. He spent decades wanting it. Elizabeth never appeared to grasp. The crown sat on her because of duty, never desire. She never campaigned, never lobbied for status, never seemed to want a single thing for herself. The mystique came from that restraint, the sense that she served something bigger than her own wishes. Charles ran the opposite campaign. For decades, the country watched him rehabilitate Camilla and walk her, step by managed step, toward the throne. To millions, it read as the one thing his mother never showed, wanting it. Elizabeth guarded the mystery by refusing to reach. Charles spent 40 years reaching. Every reach was toward the woman Diana was warned about. The one Diana said on television made 3 of them in the marriage. Number 15. The line she held for Diana. Princess consort, never queen. He crossed it for Camilla. This is where it all converges. When Camilla married Charles in 2005, the promise, made under Elizabeth, was that she would be styled princess consort, never queen. It was a line drawn out of deference to Diana's memory, out of respect for a public that had loved her. And Elizabeth held that line for 17 years. She softened it only at the very end of her life, and only to queen consort. Never simply queen, and never ever crowned. Charles crowned her, and he dropped even the word consort. Queen Camilla, the line his mother held for one woman, Diana, he crossed for another. Think about what that means. For 70 years, the crown kept a careful distance out of respect for the wife the country mourned. In 3 years, that distance was gone. Elizabeth kept the rule in her walk, in her silence, in her 70 years of never once letting the mask slip. And every rule she kept partly for Diana. 17 years of princess consort, 17 years of a line drawn out of respect for a woman the country still grieved. Held through every summer, every anniversary, every year Camilla waited for more. And then, in 36 months, gone. The question Margaret is left holding is the only one that matters. Would his mother have done that? She never did. And she never would have. Those were the 15 rules. From the silence Elizabeth held for 70 years, to the crown she never placed on Camilla's head, to the line she kept for Diana and Charles, crossed in 36 months. Not one of them was ever written in a statute. Everyone lived in the way she carried herself, and everyone died in the way he couldn't. But there is one person who watched every rule break from the closest seat in the palace, William. Elizabeth taught her rules by example. Unwritten, lived, never spelled out. Diana left hers in writing. 20 warnings to William about the very woman Charles crowned, and he's acting on every one. If you want to see the list Diana left her son, that video is right here.